Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss an article. Nearly had me spit my drink out. It was both tragic and hilarious at the same time. The government have set up a hotline to help British businesses deal with Brexit, and they've given the contract to an Indian firm. But not just that. I'd like to discuss the government's attitudes to supporting British businesses in general. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So all this Brexit nonsense about British jobs for British people, BNP, Codswallop, people criticise Labour's buy British tactic, and on the face of it, yeah, it's a bit silly, isn't it? But do you know what? I bet it worked. And this latest bit of news is exactly why it will work. Part of the attack on EU membership was these foreign companies getting British government contracts, getting these British jobs. Why don't we give them to British companies? Why don't we do that? Never mind the fact that British companies used to get a load of contracts in other EU countries as well. That wasn't mentioned. But then look what happened as soon as we left the EU. Our passports, that great symbol of Brexit, which used to be made by a British company and now made by EU companies. That was the first irony. Our post-Brexit blue that looks black passports, which could have been blue that looks black in the EU as well, are now made in the EU. Then Boris Johnson wanted a post-Brexit royal yacht. The Queen told him to piss off, so it's not going to be a royal yacht, just a state yacht, I suppose, the Brexit yacht. The idea being that it will knock the natives bandy when we go begging for trade deals and will earn us big bucks. And when people asked why, if all you need to get a really good trade deal is a big old boat moored in the harbour, why don't other countries simply build big old boats and moor them in our harbours to get good trade deals with us? Didn't seem to be an answer to that one. But even this yacht, if it's ever built, I bet it isn't, was said to be... probably needs to be given to a foreign company to design and build, because we probably can't do it ourselves. Frankly, the only government contracts that seem to be going to British companies post-Brexit are the dodgy COVID contracts that they are giving to donors and friends. And as most donors aren't actually British, even that's not always the case, is it? But this latest one is an absolute classic. Brexit's a bit of a mess. You see, you may have heard it, it's threw up huge trade barriers with our major market on our doorstep. Businesses cannot adapt to such massive changes with no notice or guidance. Like, over a long period of time, but you can't do it overnight. And even over the long period of time, you'd still be getting used to less trade. Because if you've got barriers, you can't get as much stuff through. But for those struggling to export goods to the EU, the government initially advised them, just set up a subsidiary company in the EU. It's too hard to trade with the EU. Yes, we know. Why don't you transfer stuff to the EU? Move out of Britain. Great, yeah. Why don't we just set up a new facility in the Netherlands and shift a load of British jobs overseas? That's brilliant, that, isn't it? Great Brexit benefit. In fairness, of course, it is a Brexit benefit to everywhere that isn't Britain. But given that the problems weren't teething problems after all, and businesses are continuing, what are we in now, 9 months later, to struggle, the government have decided that a hotline is the answer. The Department for International Trade, according to an article in the Times, are going to launch a hotline. It will help companies deal with the new rules, sort out the red tape, all that red tape that was going to go down apparently, all that jazz. And as a little aside, this is something that Labour called for before we left the customs union single market. Last year they were calling for this. It was obvious, of course, that businesses were going to need a lot of help, but the government was still too busy trying to pretend that everything was going to be great. But worth mentioning that, yet again, the government have implemented a Labour policy long after it was needed, and I think it would be worth Labour making a list of these and using them in the next election. Right, well, these are the policies that we had at these times, and these are the ones that the government adopted a long time after it was needed, but they still eventually adopted our policies. Use that. But back to the main topic at hand, and the contract has already been awarded to an Indian company, of course. And I'm not opposed to non-British companies getting government contracts. The government are supposed to award contracts that give the best return in terms of quality, service and cost and all the rest of it. That's the rules. But given that the government say that they left the EU in order to disengage from these rules, including state aid rules, which I'll talk about in a moment, and that they would be making sure British companies get these contracts in future. What's going on then? Because they seem to be going to international companies here. I mean, it's not just about awarding government contracts. Johnson stated his desire to change state aid rules in order to prop up failing businesses more quickly. Well, what about that oil refinery in Cheshire then? Set to collapse. Strike action looming. They owe a crap load of money to the Treasury and say they can't pay. I talked about it earlier in the week. It's close to collapse, and the Treasury are the ones to whom they are indebted. Why hasn't Boris Johnson simply ordered his shiny new Brexit Britain to take it into public ownership then? Bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? We need it for a sixth of our petrol. We have a petrol crisis still ongoing. We can't really afford a refinery to collapse. Investigate the bosses of the company for potential fraud. Absolutely, sure. Because there are suspicions about how they got into this financial mess. But take the company into public ownership if the owners don't want it. But no, Brexit was never about being able to act quickly, but to act corruptly. I remember when the steelworks near me in Scunthorpe, and in trouble, it nearly went under. And it still may be in trouble again, I don't know. But the government were urged to take it into public ownership, and they said EU rules prevented us doing it. Absolute rubbish. A larger steelworks in Italy had the same problems a few years ago. The Italian government took it over. Guess what? Italy's in the EU. EU rules have got nothing against this sort of thing. The Brexit attacks on state aid rules were not about being able to nationalise. Plenty of nationalised industries in the EU. It was about being able to use public money to enrich supporters corruptly. So what we have with our new post-Brexit chapter of British history, the one that comes just before the chapter on the return to the EU, is exactly the same way of engaging companies as before. We're no longer part of the most advanced market in the world, but we are still part of the world. When the government actually need a service, they're not just chucking money away and don't care what they get in return. When they actually need it, and they need it to work and they need it to represent good value, they'll go for whichever company best fits the brief. In the EU or out of it, that means it won't really matter whether the company is British or not. That's what this latest contract, one in a long line of similar examples, demonstrates. It's just ironic that of all the things we're paying for that weren't needed before Brexit, it seems to be foreign companies that will be benefiting every time. And in the case of this Brexit hotline, the contract to a foreign company is one that only needs to exist because Brexit actually did, far from boosting the potential for our own businesses, actually stuffed them to the point where they're going to need now some help from a guy on the end of a phone in Mumbai. And although I did have a laugh when at the end of the article it talked about the full customs declarations and controls that will be applying from January the 1st of next year, and although the government website does indeed state that, it also states that safety and security declarations will not be required until July of next year, and also they've delayed these controls twice. Why are we thinking that they won't delay them a third time? But in theory, if the government did introduce these controls in January, then this hotline will also be in place to help companies manage that as well. I'm not quite sure how much help they think they're going to get, though. Mostly, I think the responses are going to be, I think you're stuffed. I think you should close your business down because you're buggered. But never, they could give that contract to me. I could tell people that. But I also hope they have got a lot of operatives in place, because I think they're going to be getting a lot of calls. Let's just hope the contract includes the money for some decent hold music. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further. Please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.